Good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Chris Mason and Sally Nugent.
Our headlines today: a new daily high for COVID vaccinations, but as infection rates surge in Europe, there's a warning that summer holidays abroad will be extremely unlikely.
A snapshot of life during the pandemic. Millions of people are due to take part in a once-in-a-decade census.
Good morning. Wales's hopes for the Grand Slam are crushed after a last-minute try from France breaks Welsh hearts.
And raccoons on Zoom. We will meet the animals, livening up our virtual meetings.
And whilst we won't hit the 18 Celsius that some hit yesterday, today most places dry and there'll be a little bit more sunshine around. Have the details for that and your forecast for the week here on Breakfast.
Just after 8 o'clock, it is Sunday the 21st of March. Good morning to you. Our top story: more than half of all adults in the UK have now received their first coronavirus vaccine, a milestone hailed by the Health Secretary as a phenomenal achievement.
But as parts of Europe brace for a third wave of infections, scientists here say the prospect of summer holidays abroad may be impacted. John McManus reports.
It's been a record-making week in the UK, at least as far as COVID vaccines are concerned. On Friday, more than 711,000 doses were administered to the public. That means that more than half of the UK's adult population have now received their first jab. The government says the vaccination programme is a phenomenal achievement, and it insists it's on track to offer jabs to all of the over 50s by mid-April.
The vaccination programme is our route out of the pandemic. It will help us to protect people, and we know that these vaccines protect you, but we also know that they protect those around you, and they make it less likely that others, your loved ones, will catch coronavirus too. And of course, for all of us, they're our route out. So I'm just delighted that so many people are coming forward and getting the jab.
Over the past year, the UK has suffered the highest death toll in Europe. Now, numbers of infections and deaths are dropping. But in parts of mainland Europe, the virus is reasserting its grip. In response, parts of Poland and France have reintroduced partial lockdowns. Preventing those different variants of COVID entering the UK has led to a warning from scientists that holidays overseas this summer are extremely unlikely.
If we were doing better with the vaccination campaign in the EU, the story may be a little bit different as to where we might be in terms of being able to travel. I think it's been hugely damaging in the EU. I think it's really mixed messaging. The key thing to me is we need as many people as possible to take the vaccines as rapidly as possible so that we can get to high levels of protection rapidly so that we can open up, which hopefully in the longer term will include travelling internationally again.
It's not just holidaymakers who want to travel, though. Those with families living abroad are keen to swap online chat for the real thing. One way of achieving that might be a traffic light system, where travellers are given the green light to visit less risky countries, while others remain on red. John McManus, BBC News.
Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. Morning to you, Jonathan. I guess there's only one question, really, that matters, which is the timescale set out by the government for things opening up, including foreign travel, going to stick or going to slip?
Morning, Chris, and I'm afraid I don't have the answer that matters for you this morning, other than to say it's certainly not going to be accelerated, but the watchword in government is still caution. And I think it was interesting to hear the reminder from the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps yesterday that the 17th of May, when international travel hopefully will be allowed, is at the very earliest. And that's always been the case, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves of that at this point. So that's one key date for your diary. The other is the 12th of April, when the government's Vaccine International Travel Task Force will report and hopefully give some detail on where and how people will be allowed to travel this summer. So if you're waiting to book a holiday or you've got one booked, there should be some more detail then. One possible idea, as you heard in John's report there, this idea of a traffic light system where countries will be graded according to the level of coronavirus cases and also the speed and density of the vaccine rollout in those individual countries. It very much depends on what's happening elsewhere as well as what is happening in the UK. It does remain the aspiration and the hope in government that international travel will be allowed this summer, but it is by no means a guarantee.
Thanks very much, Jonathan.
More than 30 people have been arrested following anti-lockdown demonstrations in London. Crowds marched from Hyde Park to Westminster after MPs urged the government to allow peaceful protests during lockdown. Scotland Yard said a number of officers were assaulted. Some were attacked with bottles.
Having a coronavirus vaccine could be a requirement if we want to visit some countries once we're allowed to. This according to the boss of the Australian airline Qantas. Alan Joyce warned that a number of governments are looking at introducing mandatory vaccinations for all international travellers as part of a plan to revive the aviation industry. Demand for flights has fallen by 75% as a result of the pandemic.
Governments are going to insist on. I think some of the European governments are talking about other governments around the world as a condition of entry. But even if it wasn't, we think we have a duty of care to our passengers, to our crew, to say that everybody in that aircraft needs to be safe.
Refugees who come to the UK as part of a government scheme to help people fleeing war are to be granted indefinite leave to remain on arrival. The new approach is part of a series of changes to the asylum system being announced by the Home Secretary Priti Patel this week. At present, refugees are allowed to stay for 5 years and then have to make an application to live here permanently.
Flooding in parts of New South Wales has been described by officials as a once-in-a-century event.
Thousands more people could be ordered to leave their homes. The torrential rain is forecast to continue through most of the week. Let's speak now to our correspondent in Sydney, Phil Mercer. Phil, what is the latest that you can tell us?
Well, Australia is a land well used to nature's extremes, but this extreme deep-seated weather event, as it's been described by the New South Wales state government, is breaking records left, right and centre. The official view a couple of days ago was that Sydney was potentially facing a rain bomb, and certainly western parts of Australia's biggest city are under severe threat of flooding from torrential rain that has been hammering down now for quite some time, adding to the danger in some suburbs here in Sydney. The main dam, the main reservoir that supplies Sydney's drinking water at Warragamba is overflowing for the first time in about 5 years. So some very serious situations for the authorities to deal with. Thousands of people have been ordered to leave their homes and many more could follow suit in the next 24 hours. We are expecting some respite, but not until the end of the week. And what this means is that already saturated parts of eastern Australia will become more soaking, of course, increasing the risk of flooding. Also, the rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations is being disrupted here in New South Wales, and the authorities have warned residents to be aware of life-threatening flooding. So it's raining and it will still rain, as the forecast suggests, for the next few days at least.
Phil, thanks very much indeed.
The Duke of Cambridge has praised the work of those tackling the pandemic in countries caught up in war, calling them incredible heroes. Prince William joined a video call with Syrian aid workers who've received funding from countries including the UK to help vulnerable people affected by a decade of conflict. The Duke told the workers he was overwhelmed by the scale of the burden they face.
Now, at a time when there are restrictions on travel for most of us, Wales has found itself welcoming an unexpected visitor.
A giant walrus has been spotted in Pembrokeshire.
Lucky walrus.
Thousands of miles away from home, normally in the Arctic Circle, finds itself in West Wales. It's thought that the animal may be the same one that was spotted off the coast of County Kerry in Ireland last week. And biologists reckon there's a chance that it fell asleep on an iceberg and was then carried south, the sort of Walrusian equivalent of getting on a late night bus and ending up in the depot when you've had a better night out.
Yes.
Yeah, a jar or two more than was perhaps entirely sensible.
What had that walrus been up to? My goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, he's able to travel, which is a luxury the rest of us are denied.
Yeah,
but he only got a single ticket on that iceberg, didn't he? So
we need to find out how he's going to get home, don't we?
There's a follow-up in that story.
There is, isn't there? Now it's 9 minutes past 8 and a snapshot of life in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will be captured today when millions of people take part in a once-in-a-decade census.
The information gathered will be used by the government and local authorities to better fund services, but the full results may not be available to the public for 100 years. Our Home Editor Mark Easton reports.
The census builds a picture of your community. When you fill in yours, you help make decisions about services like local transport and healthcare.
Almost every decade since 1801, the UK has held a census, a detailed snapshot of our society that helps governments plan and fund the local services we need: schools, GP surgeries, roads, transport and housing. But only for the third time in its long history, part of the country will not be participating in this census day. In Scotland, it's been delayed for a year because of concerns the results would reflect the abnormal circumstances of the pandemic and prove less useful in the longer term. Lockdown means people are not necessarily staying in their usual household or have left the country during the health emergency. But the event goes ahead in the rest of the UK with the justification that understanding the impact of life under COVID will be vital in distributing funds where they're needed most after the pandemic is over.
It's easy to complete the census online. You can do it on a computer, tablet, or phone.
This census, for the first time, will be conducted primarily online. 90% of households will have received a letter with a 16-digit code to access a secure website page. But paper forms are available for those who need them. The 2021 census includes one new question, counting military veterans, and extra categories on sexual orientation and gender identity. It is a legal requirement to complete or be included in the census by the end of today, although officials will go door to door to offer support before prosecuting those who refuse to comply with a fine of up to £1,000. Mark Easton, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.